Story 1, Jokes on You. I confessed my feelings for her about 10 years late, when we were in our mid-20s. We live together now and have a dog. Life is pretty awesome. Story 2. He had friends nearby and made a joke about it, putting me down. Later, he messaged me and said he just didn't want them to judge him, but he would love to meet up. I never got over a crush faster. Story 3. I'm too smooth to confess. I did what any red-blooded masculine teenager would do. I strolled right up to her when she was with all her friends, asked her out on a date, and got torn to shreds by the lot of them. It was brutal. I nearly cried. Story 4. She got angry with me and refused to talk to me. It turns out her friend had feelings for me, and she viewed my attraction to her as a form of betrayal since her friend liked me. Story 5. Yes. Thank you. Yes, again. I'm not into girls bigger than me. I was 5 centimeters taller than him. I stopped after that. Story 6. I took her to prom and told her how I felt afterwards. She said, okay, and then went inside. I tried again when we were around 22 or 23, and we made out, but she firmly rejected me. After that, she moved on. Now we are in our 40s, single and close friends. She mentioned something that made me think she was hinting at something, so I firmly said, every crush I had in high school, we either dated or I was rejected, implying that the ball is in her court now, as I have moved on personally. Story 7. I did. We were high school sweethearts and remained great friends even though we broke up after high school. We recently attended our 40th high school reunion together. Story 8. I did not. About a week after graduation, I saw her working at a local fast food restaurant. She said to me, how come in 6 years you never asked me out? I knew you liked me since 7th grade. I asked her out on the spot, and she said she had a boyfriend now. Story 9. I confessed when high school ended. She said she had the same feelings. The next day, she told me she was excited about my confession and responded quickly, but she didn't really mean it because she had a crush on me a few months ago. I went from the happiest to the saddest in just a day. Story 10. I did. He didn't feel the same. We didn't talk for one day, and then the day after, we resumed as normal. I also told my next crush, and he is now my husband. Sometimes it works. Sometimes it doesn't. Story 11. She said I was too nice and that I would be too good for her. She then dated a man a few years older than her who abused her and used drugs. This was around 2015. I only learned about her boyfriend at the time from a mutual friend, as my crush stopped communicating shortly after our date when she told me this. Story 12. Yes and no. Someone else told him and he pretended to feel sick. I never had any boys interested in me in high school. They all told me I was unattractive. Story 13. Right after we graduated, she told me that she always had a huge crush on me. Story 14. When it comes to confessing, it shouldn't be a leap of faith. You should already have a good idea that they like you before you confess. If you're not sure or if they haven't given you any sign that they like you back, it's not worth telling them. Story 15. She screamed that she hated me and then vomited. I think she was already unwell, and the hysteria worsened her condition. Story 16. Thank you for stirring those memories. Yes, I did. We spent all Saturday together. We had drinks, danced, and kissed. When I returned to school on Monday, she was dating someone else. I have no idea what that was about. Story 17. I never had a chance in the spotlight. People I thought were friends announced it to the class. It didn't help that I was a loner, introverted, and nerdy person who liked art. Her friends started a rumor that I was going to be a school shooter. Her reaction was clear enough for me to give up on trusting anyone I thought I could. I obviously didn't harm anyone and even had faculty monitoring me. If you can't guess, I hated school. Story 18. I built up the courage to ask her out in front of her entire group of friends. She said that she needed a week to think about it, which was not exactly what I was hoping to hear. The next day, she wrote me a note and agreed to date me. We have been together for almost 20 years. Story 19. Yes, he liked me back, but life got in the way. We met again 12 years later. We are getting married in November. Story 20. She is snoring much more than I thought she would 10 years ago and still denies it any time I remind her. Story 21. I did, and he rejected me. However, we ended up dating after 8 years when we met in a different city. It should have stayed as a crush. I signed up for heartbreak, unsavory comments, and self-image issues. Story 22. She was out of my league. She was in her prime and I was at my lowest point. We dated for 1.5 years until I broke up with her because I was going through severe withdrawal from Xanax and became unhinged and delusional. I said and did many things I regret, unlike anything I can explain or compare. But I'm living with it, or at least trying to. Story 23. I had too many problems on my shoulders, and I think she never liked me based on her facial expressions when she was near me. Story 24. I ran into my partner on the first day of college. By then, I had the courage to admit my feelings. Turns out she had feelings for me too. We were together for about 3.5 years. It didn't work out, but it was a good experience. Story 25. The first person I dated for 2 weeks, but nothing came of it, and we rarely spoke for 4 years. We eventually had a brief romance as young adults, which did not end well. The second person I dated for a long time, during which I was secretly cheated on most of the time. We broke up as adults, but he made me pretend we were still together so our families would not be disappointed in him. When we finally separated completely, I felt free. Now, he spends his time bar hopping and using cocaine, dating people over 10 years younger. Story 26. I attended my class 12 farewell and knew in advance that it would not go well because she was already committed. Now we have been really good friends for the past 7 years. There is no more romantic involvement. I just did not want to have regrets back then. Experiencing rejection is much better than regretting these things. Story 27. She misunderstood, and nothing happened. I talked to her best friend about it because she was trying to set us up. I later found out that she liked me, but because of the misunderstanding, she was very embarrassed. At that point, I started dating a girl who really liked me, but I didn't feel the same way. I broke up with her after we graduated. The girl I liked went off to a university out of state, and life moved on. 20 years later, I am with my wife, and we have 3 wonderful kids. It worked out as it should. Story 28. I had a crush on someone but never had the courage to talk to her. I attended a semi-prom and wanted to take her. She was always with her friends, so I ended up asking her in the middle of the library while I was in class. Surprisingly, she said yes. The date did not go well at all, and I knew I had blown it. Still, I'm glad I asked her out instead of wondering, what if? Story 29. There were definitely girls that I was attracted to, but I never had a crush. A few relationships I had in high school were with women who came up to me. Story 30. She said she didn't like me that way. My soul was crushed for a bit, but I'm glad she rejected me. It was a valuable lesson, and in hindsight, she was not a good person. Story 31. She was part of a group of girls who didn't like me, except for her, who was polite but seemingly neutral. I received death glares from her friends, but I didn't really exist to her. Near the end of school, I asked her out, saying I would regret not telling her how I felt. She politely declined. It was nice, to be honest. Story 32. No. However, I think she knew because I was somewhat stalker-like. Anyway, I got over her before starting my junior year. There are plenty of fish in the sea, even though my self-esteem was still very low. Story 33. I did, but mutual friends later told me she didn't care and only liked to lead me on. This ended the friendship if we were ever truly friends. Story 34. It went pretty well. I scored the homecoming queen, and she received a lifetime of dad jokes. I asked the grandchildren, and they agree that we are doing fine. Story 35. I did. Then he came out to me. We grew up in an extremely homophobic culture, so I was more touched that he was able to confide in me than if he had simply returned my feelings. We remained close for 10 years and then grew apart when life happened. I will always credit him for making me a staunch supporter of LGBTQ rights. Story 36. I did it in middle school. They had this anonymous candygram initiative that the cheerleaders were using to raise money. I sent one to her, and apparently it wasn't as anonymous as it was supposed to be, since she was friends with all of them. She approached me at lunch in a packed cafeteria and very loudly returned my candygram along with some obviously orchestrated laughs from the popular kids' table. I pretty much never spoke to her again after that. Many years later, after we graduated high school, I was working at a pizza place, and she came in with a friend. I took their order and started working on it, and I could hear her telling her friend about the situation and laughing. What a way to instantly kill any goodwill towards a person. Story 37. Life is funny sometimes. In school, I had a crush. Let's call him Y. I mustered up the courage to confess with a letter, complete with a yes/no checkbox for him to tick. Just as I was about to hand it over, my friend, let's call him X, snatched it and ran. Naturally, I chased him down, trying to avoid the impending embarrassment. After what felt like an eternity of pursuit, he finally returned it. Frustrated, I tore it up on the spot, but then quietly picked up the pieces and kept them. Eventually, I ended up telling Y about my feelings anyway. He said yes, and just like that, we were together for a few days. Then we broke up. His sister didn't like me or something. Months later, at a science fair, he reached out and we patched things up. This time, we lasted a month or two before breaking up again. Turned out his sister still didn't like me, and that was the end of my first relationship. The grand total of actual conversations? Maybe 3 hours, and even that's a generous estimate. Fast forward 10 years. I've been dating X, the same guy who ran off with my letter, for the past 5 years. Life has its ways. Story 38. I started talking online about 7 years after graduation. I found out we each had a crush on the other all through high school. We have been married for 13 years and have 4 children. Story 39. She laughed and said hello. Apparently, she got back together with her ex, and he tried to fight me. Story 40. We had second period chemistry together and always talked about seemingly random things. For his birthday, I gave him a thoughtful gift and wrote him a letter. At lunchtime, his teammates were standing on lunch tables reading it aloud while laughing along. Later that day, he received a better present from an upperclassman. I dreaded going to that class for the rest of the year. I was hoping he would be unattractive and overweight now. He is not. Story 41. I saw her at the bar 7 years later. I confessed my feelings, and she kissed me. We went out a few times afterward, but nothing really happened. Story 42. Yes, I did, only to realize that I actually don't like her that way. She didn't say anything. I apologized, and that was it. We are good friends. I don't know the answer, and from the bottom of my heart, I don't care. Story 43. I had a strong crush on him. I spent 4 years being a good friend to him, even followed him to college. Nothing ever came of it. I'm thankful now because I see photos of him as an adult, and he has let himself go. Story 44. We dated off and on for 2 years. He is now the godfather of my oldest child. We live on opposite ends of the country but chat briefly and catch up every 6 to 8 months. Could have been a worse outcome, I guess. Story 45. I did. He wasn't into me at first, but we became really good friends. The entire time, he was fully aware of how I felt. One night, something changed for him. We were together for 5 years. Story 46. I did. She got pregnant the first time we had a sexual encounter, and we married the following summer. She stayed for 5 years, but after that, I raised our son by myself. Story 47. My secondary school crush was significant, especially considering I was only 14 at the time. I made it a point to be different in high school, and yes, I did make a move. As it turned out, our entire class kind of made us a couple since we shared birthdays and both acted on our feelings. We dated for a few years, but it ultimately didn't work out. That being said, I have no regrets about being more direct. While I was rejected a few times, it helped me gain confidence in dating other women, including my wife, whom I met while on vacation. We were both single and enjoying our time away. So, my advice to anyone is to express your feelings to your crush, but be prepared for rejection and the possibility of losing a friendship if your crush is a friend. Story 48. Twice that I remember, I was rejected both times. They were nice enough about it, but I would never do it again. Story 49. I told her that I like her. She said she likes me, but only as a friend. We drifted apart after a few months. Story 50. Yes, we had an adult conversation, and he let me down gently. For context, we were actually best friends, and I didn't want to say anything for fear of ruining our friendship, but things are just fine, even now, 10 years later. Story 51. Yes, we connected for a couple of years later in life. He still messages me occasionally to ask how I am. Story 52. She was my crush, and I was hers. I had no idea. I found out a few years ago when we ran into each other on Facebook. I'm happily married, so we can only imagine what could have been. Story 53. I didn't have to confess that he knew, but I never pursued it. For a few years afterwards, I would always see him on the subway. I would look at him and think, what did I ever see? Story 54. The first one I didn't, but she absolutely knew. The whole school did. The second one was my high school sweetheart. Story 55. Yes, we dated for 2 years, and they broke up with me last month. Now, I am an emotional wreck. Story 56. She sent me a really nice message that led to a date, but they had to move for a job. Fortunately, we stayed in contact. Story 57. I had a whole thing about this. I pined for a girl all through high school. My graduating class had 465 students, but we were in all the honors classes and participated in debate, forensics, scholars bowl, and mock trial together. There was basically a group of about 25 to 35 people who did all the honors activities, making us feel like a high school within the school. If this woman even remembers me, she probably views me as the quintessential nice guy. Honestly, I am so embarrassed and guilty about it that my neurodivergent mind can't let it go. I am 41 and married, yet I read stories online and think I was such an idiot. I shouldn't dwell on this after hearing stories of other guys frustrated with their dating lives. I made friends with this girl when we were sophomores, and she already had a boyfriend. I really was not trying to be that guy, but I think everyone in our class, and I later found out several of our teachers, knew I had feelings for her. I'm certain she did too. During junior year, she broke up with her boyfriend and started dating someone new before I even knew. Our senior year, there was a tragic situation, and the person she was seeing passed away. I am not the kind of person who would immediately make a move, but by spring, I got the impression she wanted me to ask her out, so I did. Earlier that year, before her breakup, I had asked another girl from the group of advanced placement students to prom. This girl wrote me a letter explaining that she hadn't expected to be asked and was flattered, but would only accept if I understood it was completely platonic. I said I understood, and that was fine. I don't know what others would have done, but it never crossed my mind to back out of taking the first girl I had asked. A mutual friend was also looking for a date, and the two went together. The Monday after prom, she dumped me for him, so we dated for about 3 weeks. I did some foolish things, like writing a cringy letter pleading for her not to break up with me. I tried to be more outgoing with our friend group, which came across as weird and forced. I asked out another girl I thought was cute, but we had nothing in common, and I was rejected, told to wait until college because any girl at our high school would know she was a rebound and would not be interested. What really sucked was that we got to attend national tournaments for both mock trial and debate together. So I had basically 2 school-funded pseudo-vacations with my ex and without her boyfriend. While I had a good time, it was also difficult for my 18-year-old self. It was impossible to fit back into the just a friend box. I still had strong feelings for her. She knew that, and I hope I didn't make her miserable. While going to find her and the girls she was sharing a hotel room with at the forensics national tournament, I overheard her saying through the door that I was too intense, and that was part of why she broke up with me. That has stuck with me my entire life. My wife loves how intense I can be, so things worked out. While at the mock trial national tournament, one evening our coach pulled me aside to ask how I was doing. I ended up breaking down and crying. That's also when I found out that the teachers were aware and had opinions about student relationships. Looking back, it's clear that these experiences affected me. They contributed to who I am today, but it seems trivial because we only dated for less than a month. For me, there was also a friendship with her knowing she had me as a backup or fallback if she ever wanted. That probably seems problematic, but I willingly put myself in that position, and she couldn't have been unaware. It was clearly unhealthy for me and unfair to her, which is why I look back and feel guilty and embarrassed. The fact that I'm now 41 and can still remember and write about it shows it impacted me. When I think back on it, I figure she must think I was the sort of nice guy who befriends women exclusively to try to date them. Story 58. I did. After staring at her every minute we were in class for at least a month or two, I realized she didn't want to be near me. I am lucky she didn't get a restraining order or something. Story 59. One girl found out and told me she didn't like me that way. We became friends a few years later for a while via email, as she had moved away. At one point, she accused me of being a stalker and said she never wanted to speak to me again. So, I left her alone and wouldn't even say hi if I ran into her in a crowd. The other girl I think assumed I liked her but didn't say anything to me, and I didn't say anything to her because I believed she knew. From her behavior, I assumed she didn't feel the same way. If I had a time machine, I would go back and tell the girl who actually did ask me out yes. At the time, I was so into the second girl that I made up an excuse about having too much homework to go out with her. She was very attractive, and going to a movie with her, as she suggested, would not have been a problem. Who knows where it might have led? Story 60. Why would you ever confess a crush? My technique was to flirt openly until they succumbed to my charms or did not. Story 61. I did after the crush had somewhat passed, and she said, "Oh well, you're cute." I would have totally said yes if you asked me out. And that's how I learned that sometimes you just have to put the ball in the air, metaphorically. Story 62. I have an interesting story. I spent 1 or 2 years in the same class as this girl, and I didn't notice her at all. I don't know how. Then she was transferred to another parallel class, and I lost track of her. It was as if I forgot she existed. Suddenly, after one random interaction, I developed a crush on her. However, my introverted and shy nature prevented me from taking any action. Then she graduated early. In Russia, you can graduate after the 9th or 11th grade. I only continued to see her occasionally because she lived between my school and my home, leading to brief encounters with small talk. Nothing more. Another year passed, and I decided I would ask her out when I returned from summer vacation. Summer went by, and I came back to see her face on missing posters everywhere. That was 12 years ago. To my knowledge, she was never found. I still wonder if I am better or worse off. Story 63. No, looking back at one particular encounter with her at the graduation party, she was clearly interested in me, and I was completely unaware at the time. Story 64. I did, after high school, he admitted to me that he liked me too and asked me why I didn't say anything. I was like, "Why didn't you say anything?" I just told him I was scared. But at that point we had already graduated and hadn't seen each other in a while. I think we were both over our little crush. Story 65. I did, and she laughed it off. She married her prom date and they had 2 kids. He was charged with domestic violence. But she stayed with him until they recently divorced after he decided he was transgender at 41. I know these details because I responded to a 3-car motor vehicle collision, and she ended up being my patient in the ambulance. She apologized for laughing at me in high school, but I lied and told her it didn't bother me. Story 66. Yes, on Valentine's Day my freshman year of high school, I got her a gift, but I never asked her out. I just told her that I liked her. Story 67. We were both 18, and I said I would love to date her because we were friends. She replied that she couldn't because her sister liked me. I asked if she wanted to date her sister, but I said no. We kind of drifted apart after that, and I haven't spoken to her since. This was in the 1980s. Story 68. I was genuinely surprised when she said she felt the same way. We dated for almost 2 years, but I went off to college and so did she, so we had to end it. However, it was on good terms and we remain good friends. Our families have vacationed together, and she is also my family's dentist. Story 69. She said yes to the date, but I felt awkward and didn't know how to date properly or handle myself. Story 70. He let me down like a newborn puppy, very gently. I was also amazed that anyone would have a crush on him at all. He is married and the theater director at a local high school in our area. His wife is great. Story 71. I made a mistake comparing it to her kissing our friend, who had a girlfriend the week before, and she thought I was blackmailing her. She never spoke to me again. Story 72. I failed miserably. I was socially awkward in the worst way, picked on and made fun of. The first person absolutely ignored me but told everyone what I did. The second person's friend said I was in a lower class and that I wasn't even close to their level. People can be mean. Story 73. I did. She was the girl in school way out of my league. She led me on for a while, married an older guy. Years later, I ran into her after her divorce and spent one night with her. I never saw her again. Story 74. A girl confessed to me that she had a crush on me during high school. Unfortunately, she revealed this to me about 10 years later, after she had gotten married. Story 75. I'm not yet out of high school and it was a joke. I thought he was gay. A week in, I realized I actually liked him. We have been together for a year now. Story 76. Several of them, but not like a confession. More like a casual invitation to grab dinner and a movie at the mall after school next Friday. Then going on several dates, meeting up before or after school whenever possible. If you turn it into a big deal, you might scare them off. However, most single teenagers will be excited by the prospect of a date with someone interested in them, especially if that person is in the same general popularity or attractiveness range. Story 77. No, I was too shy and scared of rejection to say anything that was over 20 years ago. We're both married with children now, but occasionally I run into him in town. He is still very attractive and always says hi. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I hadn't been so afraid. Story 78. She confessed and joined the prefect club. She forwarded the confession letter to the principal as proof to remove me from the club. Story 79. Yes, while I was still in high school, she laughed at me. To be fair, my approach was clumsy and ridiculous. Story 80. She called me a bulldozer, apparently. What irked me more is that I didn't even say anything to her. It was someone else who blurted out that I had a crush on her. Story 81. A friend told him that someone had a crush on him. We were talking online and he mentioned it, asking if I knew who it was. I told him it was me and he went quiet. Then he said, "Oh, I don't feel the same way. Sorry." I apologized for having a crush on him. I had forgotten all about it until this post. Thank you. Story 82. No, and it was just as well. I was a mess in my youth. 46 years later, after we have been through divorces, widowhood, and have most of the difficulties out of our systems, I find him just as attractive as I did then, and we are getting along exceptionally well. Story 83. I confessed to my crush that I liked him when we were 13. I was rejected and ridiculed by his friends for thinking he was in my league. I stood there humiliated while he laughed at the jokes made at my expense. 9 years later, after a transformation, I ran into him. He asked me out and wouldn't stop flirting, begging me to give him my number. I rejected him because I have the best boyfriend now, who would never let anyone make fun of me and doesn't care what I look like, whether I've had a transformation or not. Story 84. I was very scared. Because I was too shy to put myself out there, I did not date until college, and it was not a healthy relationship. Story 85. I liked him from middle school to high school. He playfully teased me and my best friend. I never confessed my feelings because I knew he didn't like me. I felt unattractive back then. Fast forward to college, he became a playboy, and I learned he had liked my best friend since middle school and recently confessed to her. She rejected him. I never felt better. Story 86. I told my best friend that I liked him since second grade. We did not start dating because he was interested in another girl. We remained best friends. Eventually, we dated long distance in college years later, but it did not work out. We just grew apart. Story 87. I told him I liked him, and we dated for 2 years. Then he ended the relationship and took his ex-girlfriend to the 3 Days Grace concert we were supposed to attend together for Valentine's Day. Story 88. I was in middle school, and we had just moved in with my mom's new boyfriend. I had changed schools. I saw this guy who was in several of my classes. He was very nerdy, like me, and very smart with a great vocabulary. I loved it. He always knew the answers in class and had a dry sense of humor. Anyway, one day my mom came to school and said, "We are leaving, so make sure you get all your things." Apparently, we were never coming back. She had moved all our things out while we were at school. As I was emptying out my locker, Philip walked by me, and I said, "Philip, I'm leaving, and I want you to know I really like you." He said, "Gross," and walked away. Story 89. We started dating and are still together 17 years later with a house, a child, and a puppy. A rare sight indeed. Story 90. I didn't confess, but her friend told her for some reason. She was fine about it. She never mentioned that she knew, but everything was good between us until graduation. Story 91. I left an anonymous love note in the locker next to mine after the first day of school. She immediately knew it was me because it was the second day of school. She said it was sweet. I didn't know how to follow up on that, so I just let the flame die. I know, what a situation, right? Story 92. It was in 10th grade when she was a year younger than me. I was really nervous. I met her in the corridors before class and asked her out for a drink or coffee. I also gave her flowers on Women's Day a couple of days earlier. She said she did not want to pursue anything with me. Story 93. I did, but only after he did. It was quite sweet. He was embarrassed that I knew about it and hit his head against the wall. We dated for a few months. I still love him dearly, but now I love his husband dearly too. Story 94. I was rejected. It turned out he was secretly dating another girl in my class. It was a huge disappointment. Story 95. I didn't have a typical high school experience, but if I could have confessed to a crush, I would like to imagine it would be an awkward yet sweet moment, perhaps with some nervous stammering and a hopeful smile. Did you ever take that leap in the past? Story 96. I got friend-zoned big time, and my best friend wouldn't stop teasing me about it. I am marrying my best friend next year. Story 97. Both times, they initially liked me for a while but never admitted it. After confessing this to everyone, they proceeded to hurt me with cruel letters and hostile gestures. Scarred me. Story 98. Instead, I was just her good friend. Even when we bought tickets to a dance, she had hers made out to her first name followed by my last name. She showed it to me and asked who I was planning to go with. I replied, "Ha ha ha, cool. I don't think I'm going to go." Story 99. No, but I learned from watching a few others. Nothing good comes from giving a heartfelt speech about your feelings to someone who doesn't really know who you are. Story 100. In high school, I remember buying a teddy bear and a balloon for someone I had a crush on. The day I was going to give them to her, she started dating someone else. I also heard rumors that she thought I was repulsive. I gave the items to the theater staff instead. Story 101. We had a mutual understanding and were flirting, but when I confessed, we started drifting apart. This was probably because we were in different classes and because I spent more time with her twin sister during our second and third years. Story 102. I still think fondly of her and remember her as she was then, though nearly 40 years have passed and I never saw her again after high school because I moved away. Story 103. She rejected me the first couple of times. Then we hung out one summer, and she kissed me and asked me why I didn't ask her out. We are married now. Story 104. I couldn't tell them in person, so I wrote them a message. I expressed everything, but it didn't go the way I had hoped. They said they saw me more as a friend and didn't want to lose that connection. However, I knew they didn't have the heart to tell me they weren't attracted to me. Story 105. I will share my story of the last event before I graduated because I wasn't informed of the outcome until a couple of weeks ago. I had a crush on a friend I had known since kindergarten. I cannot explain what caused me to like her suddenly. I remember the crush, but I didn't recall the events that unfolded at the end until I was reminded recently. Prom, I asked her to slow dance. She seemed unsure how to react, walked away, and didn't say anything. I honestly don't remember this. I'm guessing I forgot because, after returning home, my family and I were all awake until 3 a.m. for some reason. Recently, I learned that she felt bad about how it all happened and wanted to apologize. I haven't seen her since I found this out, but I truly hope she doesn't feel bad. Story 106. Rejected every time. You would think I would be used to it by 41. But now a no means it will take a year or two before I even try again. Story 107. I am currently in high school, in the 12th grade. I asked her out and she said yes. We are going on a date tomorrow. Wish me luck. Story 108. I confessed and then said I was just kidding because I knew she was heterosexual. A year later, I told her I wasn't kidding, and she was flattered. Story 109. Sure did, during my sophomore year. I asked her out in person after class. She said she wanted to think about it. A few hours later, she texted me to reject me. I don't know what I did to deserve that kind of response, but I made sure we stayed friendly through the rest of high school. I have not acted on another crush since. Story 110. Yes, I did. I was not seen as more than a friend, but it was nice to know so I can move on. During the last week of school, I randomly slammed my locker and shouted his name, asking him why he never asked me out. I had cuddled up to him and made obvious flirts, but I was too shy to actually ask him out. Turns out he was into another girl. She wasn't into him and she was a respectable person. Story 111. We dated for 3 months, but she left me for someone who cheated on her and then discarded her. She returned, but I wasn't going to tolerate her nonsense anymore. Story 112. I wrote her a letter. She replied, saying she wasn't attracted to me and wanted to be friends. We became very close friends for years, but I always had feelings for her. I regret not telling her again later. Story 113. I felt embarrassed when I discovered that all my crushes were interested in my best friend, which made me feel unattractive throughout school. Story 114. I actually did. She got really mad and said that I was disgusting. I am a lesbian. Then she said that we barely knew each other. We were best friends for 5 years, together all the time. We sat next to each other, talked constantly, and at home we would chat and study together. She would get me presents, and I would get her presents too. I do not know. I am not the delusional type. I just thought, why not? I wanted to see if she felt the same, but she didn't. Story 115. In high school, encouraged by my friends, I sent a Day of the Dead candygram to my crush, Timothy. I paid $2 for it and waited nervously to hear his reply. I was sweaty and anxious, feeling like I wanted to puke while writing on the gram. The next day, he approached me to say he was flattered but very much interested in men. It was the first and last time I ever confessed to a crush. Story 116. Oh yeah, that didn't go well. She said, oh, I don't like you like that. You're just my good friend. Story 117. We were both seniors and had English together. I had a crush the moment I saw her, but I never did anything about it. As graduation approached, I thought, if I don't ask her out soon, I'm probably never going to see her again. So I decided to make a move one day. She responded by saying, I don't know. And at the time, I didn't realize she was trying to decline nicely. I said, okay, just let me know then, and walked away. In the end, she never got back to me, and the last time I saw her was at graduation. It was so embarrassing, and I still cringe whenever I think about that interaction, even 3 years later. Story 118. Not until after we graduated. We have been together for 14 years, married for 5.5 years, with our first child on the way. I would say it went pretty well. Story 119. Yes, we dated for a few years and broke up in college. We reconnected 6 years later and have now been married for 14 years. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.